I'm joined this morning by South African-born transplant surgeon, billionaire businessman, bioscientist, media proprietor, as well as the inventor of the drug Abraxane, known for its efficacy against breast, pancreatic, and lung cancer, and most recently, investor in South Africa's medical biotech industry just late last year. Witsi, like myself, graduate of University of the Witwatersrand. Wits does give you the edge, and it certainly did give our guest this morning the edge, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. Thank you so much for joining us live from Los Angeles. How are you this morning?
Well, thank you. And it's dangerous from Cape Town to say you're Witsi.
It's true. I'm both. You're a donor partner of the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation at Stellenbosch University. It's led by one of our own friends to the show here on Breakfast with Refilwe, Professor Tulio D'Oliveira, a leading epidemiologist amongst the scientists whose genomic sequencing helped the world establish and discover the beta variant against of COVID-19 about a year ago. Tell us why this was an important donor partnership for you.
If you're talking about the Omicron and the genomic sequencing and what SERI was, it's really important. In fact, South Africa has taken the lead to really monitor these variants that occur, because to me, variations and mutations are going to be inevitable. It's what viruses do. The awareness is important, but the response is probably more important. And so this is what we do. We were developing vaccines to be responsive to these variants.
In September last year, you invested in the NAND SA vaccine production hub in Brackenfell's Brackengate Business Park. It was officially launched with you and President Ramaphosa just a few weeks ago in January, and it's in partnership with the CSIR and the South African Medical Research Council. Help us understand, this is going to be a pioneering, a definite first for South Africa in terms of the actual development of vaccines. Do we have the technical skill, and what was it in that particular center that you found attractive?
You know, when I left after having treated patients with TB and recognized that until I could come back and really help the country stand on its feet. When I left, Mandela was still in Robben Island, and now I've come back, and the country really has an opportunity to be completely self-reliant. And I search high and low because what we were focusing on scale, and the scale I'm talking about is 1 billion doses, but not 1 billion doses that you would finish full just in vials, but 1 billion doses you'd make from scratch. And we have the capacity, we have the know-how, we have the technology, we have the platforms. And I'm completely convinced there is sufficient innovation, human capital, scientific skills, desire, not only to learn, but to elevate the country to become, I believe, the Singapore of Africa.
That is a massive feat. And I want to talk a little bit about those ambitions that you have, because this vaccine development includes not only vaccines against COVID-19, but also potentially the development of vaccines against HIV, potentially, as you say, against tuberculosis as well. Can you help us understand the difference between an antibody vaccine and an antibody and T-cell based vaccine?
The way all the first generations vaccines work is that they create antibodies to the outside of the virus to block the virus from entering. Unfortunately, it blocks, but not sufficiently, but it does block to an extent. And then the virus enters and then grows. So it doesn't really prevent then the transmission once it gets into the body to spread to other people, what we call transmission. The only way to prevent that is to kill the cell or the factory that's allowing it to grow. The only thing that can do that is T cells. So on the one hand, antibodies are important to block, but you need T cells to kill. And if you have both, not only prevent infection, you would then actually prevent transmission. And in this way, you stop the proliferation, you stop the mutations, and really truly stop the pandemic, hopefully in its tracks.
And this seems to be the confluence between vaccine protection, as you are describing it, and the variants that you say are here to stay.
Correct, because as the T cells develop, there are so many points in which the virus cannot mutate against, because then it'll stop itself from even growing. So the T cells can recognize it. So what we're doing is developing T cells for the inside of the virus and the antibodies on the outside of the virus. And if you then have both inside and outside, you've covered the bases. And that's what our vaccine does.
That's incredible. I mean, this is an insight that obviously comes at the end of, well, not the end of, you're continuously learning, I'm sure, but an incredible career in medical learning and in your surgeon research, surgeon work and research. I want to talk a little bit about that lifelong desire that you spoke about earlier. If we can speak a bit about your life. You're the son of a herbalist yourself, your father, and you continued in his desire and his commitment to healing people by following in medicine. Was he a very big influence on your choice of career?
Well, incredible influence. So, you came from China. I was born in South Africa in Port Elizabeth, and he came from a Chinese community called Hakka, and basically philosophy of Hakka is you help everybody in the community who need help. And he would have these cans of herbs arrive from China, foul smelling, cooking these things, forcing me to taste them. Anybody who knocked on the door had an infection, they would get a treatment. There would be no charge. He would just treat them, and we would watch, and I would watch and learn. And it really inspired me to want to become a doctor, and that's what I became. My entire world was not only on the world of transplants, where that was fixing it, but pancreatic cancer, that was trying to fix it. And then COVID, which to me, COVID and cancer behave very similarly. It spreads, it evades the immune system. And we were well on our way in cancer to develop T-cell vaccines for cancer. So that's why we adopted what we adopted into COVID.
Your medical internship, you undertook it during the Soweto uprising of 1976. You mentioned a little earlier that you left while Nelson Mandela was still on Robben Island. What did your experience of South Africa under apartheid have in terms of influence on your career path?
In a retrospective way, it really made me a better human being with regard to empathy. I came from Port Elizabeth Chinese school where they weren't the greatest teachers because we were segregated in school. Mm-hmm. And I was terrified in medical school because it was very clear that we had a quota of 2, I think, or 3 Chinese students, and the rest were all white and very well educated. And I worked my way through and came to the decision I wanted to work in the Johannesburg General Hospital, which were all the best professors in the world were. And I was told it wasn't race, it was about merit. I didn't believe that. So I said, okay, and what is the deal? I said, well, there's only 4 spots of the top 4. And the bad news is I was in the top 4. So I went back to my professor and I said, okay, here I am. He said, oh my God, and we'll have to go to Pretoria to get permission. And right. It came back and said, yes, you could get permission to work provided you took 50% of the salary of your white peers. And my white peers who were my friends said, no, we're going to go on strike. I said, you're not. I'm going to take 50% salary because I want to learn. And that's how I entered as the first Chinese intern at Johannesburg General Hospital.
It's just such an incredible story, Dr. Soon-Shiong, and it's incredible not only because of what you overcame and what you were willing to sacrifice in order to learn for your ultimate goal of helping, but it's also incredible from the perspective of how little has changed today. You lived through the real apartheid. Would you agree with how people characterize the global response to the pandemic, the exclusion of emerging markets and frontier markets like Africa and the global South? Would you agree with the characterization of it as a form of vaccine apartheid, or even some apartheid with respects to the availability of tests right at the outset?
I completely agree. In fact, I've been speaking out about that, and I actually use the word vaccine apartheid. And it's all about this colonialism and, the second-rate attitude. And I've been watching this show, Bending the Arc, Jim Kim and Farmer and what they were doing. And, people of color, people of humanity, and, people of color, not because they're people of color and they're stupid, they can't do things, or etc. Right.
Right. We can't have quotas. We need to go on merit. We need to get the best. I hear it all the time. Trust me.
What infuriates me is the idea that maybe the South Africans can't do it because they're not smart or they don't have the human capital. And I keep on saying, the giants of medicine came from South Africa. Many diseases. The first CAT scan was invented, by the way, at Cape Town. So I think it is unconscionable what's happened. And especially in patients with HIV and TB. So when we're coming home is not just to work on COVID. I'll be working on schistosomiasis, on TB, on HIV, hookworm, cervical cancer, which is virally induced cancers. And the beauty is that I've had the privilege of being trained now in the United States with all the resources and all the knowledge. And I have a very loyal team that's been with me for 20 years. And all of them are going to contribute to the transfer of this information.
We can't wait to receive it and make an equally strong contribution from our side of the world. What are your thoughts on universal public health systems that are increasingly advocated around the world, including the national health insurance here at home?
I tried very much here in the United States. As you said, we spend more money than anybody in the world, frankly, and have not the best healthcare because it's driven, unfortunately, based on reimbursement and fee for service. Where, frankly, there's no what we call CPT code, which is the code and you get reimbursed for health. There's a CPT code for actually treating you when you get disease. With a country like South Africa and even a smaller country like Botswana, the opportunity to create universal healthcare, but most importantly, the ability to manage outcomes. If you can actually measure outcomes in real time and then take 10% of the population will actually account for 90% of the cost. And this is for chronic diseases, things like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension. All of these, by the way, with today's technology is completely monitorable in real time. And if we can take healthcare to where they are, and we are actually working on this right now with places like the GoGo Foundation, where we're working with Jane Simmons and taking healthcare to the grandmothers in the villages with mobile vans in South Africa. The opportunity to actually have a universal healthcare or national health system but not for pricing control, but really outcomes measurement, yes, I think is a very exciting opportunity. And I would encourage the country to go in that direction. What
has your experience been of investing in South Africa today as compared to, or of South Africa today, let me say, as compared to when you left?
Coming back, there's clearly lots of needs, infrastructural needs, electricity needs, water needs, know-how needs, capital infusion. And I believe now is the right time for us to come back because I think we could make an impact. So the answer is I'm excited to come back, and I think now is the right time.
Excited to have you back. I have 2 quick pop quizzes for you. Quiz questions. You are the son of what is now called Gqeberha. Are you able to say that?
Rebecca?
Rebecca, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. I can take my Rebecca.
Fantastic. And then something to teach me. You are the embodiment of Ubuntu. And I was curious if there were a Chinese term you might be able to teach me that means that.
Well, a Chinese term.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now you're embarrassing me because I can say Ubuntu and I can understand Ubuntu and I can say such good stuff in Afrikaans, but my Chinese is terrible.
Fair enough. I made a poor assumption. I apologize. No, because we always say that nobody has the word for Ubuntu in the world, and yet, and obviously you are a South African, and so you are able to express it in your behavior and in your incredible feat of achievement. And I was curious whether there was something that we could take on from your father's generation who instilled this in you in the very first place.
Well, and I think one of the most amazing songs is we've listened to John Lennon's Imagine song. And if you sort of imagine the world the way he sort of saw that before he passed, and I think in Ubuntu is a little bit of that, really, really caring for humanity and trying to help.
We're grateful that you carry that Ubuntu, that you continue to imagine and remind us to imagine. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation and your time. We really appreciate it here on Breakfast with Refilwe on Cape Talk, and can't wait for your return. Let us know if you need any media support. We're always here, or economic support. I'm always here in terms of the spreading your wonderful message.
Breakfast with Refilwe Moloto on Cape Talk.